of you may be wondering, why the Catholic faith and not just Christian or non-denominational?
I'm not sure if you know this well-known right-wing commentator, Caitlin Bennett, who recently converted to Catholicism after being an atheist for many years. In the first clip, she reflects honestly on why she remained an atheist for so long, and more importantly, on what she eventually found deeply unsettling, even frightening about living without any belief in God. Let's listen.
Being an atheist is not what most people think it is. At least it wasn't for me. Most of you probably think that people are atheists because they want to do whatever they want and have no consequences. If you don't believe in God, His commandments, sin, or hell, then you don't have to worry about living a sinful lifestyle or feeling guilty for your actions. This was not the case for me. Everything I'm about to tell you is, of course, from my own experience and my perspective. Being an atheist was one of the most terrifying things I ever put myself through, and I did it for more than a decade. Because I was so ignorant and uninformed, I feared what it would mean to go to hell. When I started doubting God and religion at around 12 years old, it came from a place of disbelief at the stories in the Bible and also being scared of hell and Satan. It was easier for me to just reject it all if it meant not taking seriously the possibility of burning in hell or the reality of Satan. But that did not make my fears of those two things go away. The most memorable fear I had was dying. The thought of my death terrified me. Did I really live just to be put in the ground? Is my whole existence going to end with worms eating my brain? And the worst part was thinking, what would my family endure after death? Would I really never see them again? Unknown to my 12-year-old brain, rejecting the goodness of God's light for the sake of trying to minimize my fears of hell would lead me to exacerbate my anxieties and fears surrounding this topic. You see, what would always occupy my mind was the question, what if I'm wrong? And that is an uncomfortable feeling to live with as a teenager and young adult. I firmly believe that anyone who proudly boasts their atheism is trying to convince themselves that they're right, not the people they're boasting to. And that comes from experience. Even though it scared me, I had always heard that if you reject God to your friends, then He will reject you from heaven. Well, I had already done that, so why would I stop? Unfortunately for me, I did not grasp the depth and beauty of what Jesus' death meant for people like me. I truly had no understanding whatsoever of His mercy, His sacrifice, and ultimately His forgiveness.
What makes her reflection especially compelling is one particular point she raises. As she explains that for many atheists, rejecting belief in God also makes it far easier to reject the reality of hell and Satan. So once the supernatural is dismissed entirely, moral accountability quietly erodes. If there is no God to answer to, no hell to avoid, and no real evil intelligence at work in the world, then there is very little reason to feel troubled by one's actions. And in practice, this becomes a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card, a way of living without any ultimate responsibility or judgment. This is precisely why one of Satan's greatest victories is convincing people that he does not exist at all. When people believe there is no devil, they stop being vigilant. They no longer guard their thoughts, desires, or choices. Temptation is no longer recognized as temptation. It is simply rebranded as authenticity or self-expression. Now, with that context in mind, in the next clip, Caitlin shares what ultimately broke through that worldview and led her toward conversion. Let's listen.
I'm sure many of you are asking what made me convert. I'm sure you can guess that the answer isn't that I had a magical experience that just changed my mind one day and I've been blessed ever since. Instead, it started years ago with my incredibly devout Catholic husband. We married in the Catholic Church in 2020 because he wanted to make sure our marital vows were sealed by Christ and fulfilled through the sacrament of holy matrimony. I had no idea how important that was back then, but I'm so thankful today that he ensured that happened. Over the next year, I would continue to reject religion altogether until he asked me to attend Mass with him for probably the 500th time, and I begrudgingly agreed. Now, if you've ever been to a Catholic Mass, you might understand what I mean when I say I had a lot of questions about the faith and the traditions of Catholicism, so I started asking them. Then I would ask the same questions to many of my non-Catholic and even non-Christian friends. For months, I would just ask an incredible amount of questions and realized I literally knew nothing about Christianity. Of course, I rejected it for years. How could I accept something that I didn't realize I knew nothing about? The more I learned about the truth, the more the lens that I saw the world through changed.
Stepping back for a moment, this connects closely with an insight Bishop Barron makes in one of his videos critiquing the new atheist of the 1980s. He observes that they tend to stop asking questions precisely at the moment when things start to get interesting. And I think that observation gets to the heart of the problem. One of the best ways to engage with a belief system you don't accept isn't to mock or dismiss it, but to ask serious questions about it. Questions aimed at understanding rather than scoring points. Over the past 2,000 years, countless people have come to respect and even embrace the Catholic faith simply by doing exactly that, asking questions. And the reason is simple. The Church actually has answers. Not shallow slogans, but answers grounded in 2 millennia of philosophical reflection, theological reasoning, and lived human experience. Now, those answers may not persuade everyone right away, and that's perfectly fine, but they are never random or ad hoc. They are rooted in a coherent understanding of truth, reality, and what it means to be human. That's why for anyone watching who's struggling to believe in God, I would offer this simple starting point. Don't begin with conclusions. Begin with asking questions. Ask honestly about the very things you find difficult or unbelievable. You may not arrive at Catholicism overnight, but you will be engaging a tradition that has taken the pursuit of truth seriously for over 2,000 years. This brings us naturally to the next stage of Kaylin's journey. In the third clip, she explains why she ultimately chose the Catholic faith rather than Protestantism or non-denominational Christianity. Let's listen.
Some of you may be wondering, why the Catholic faith and not just Christian or non-denominational? In the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I asked several different types of Christians and non-Christians the same questions. The only answers that made sense were from the Catholic perspective. It is the only faith that can answer questions about the origins of the universe, the compatibility between faith and science, the way God reveals himself to mankind, the meaning behind sacred scripture, and the way in which he communicates his spirit to us sacramentally today. And the greatest thing is that it traces all the way back to Christ himself through a clear succession of the apostles, so that we can be 100% confident that we are receiving the same Jesus as Peter and Paul 2,000 years ago, in exactly the same manner that he intended. As my priest would say, the other versions of Christianity that broke off from Catholicism failed to trace themselves back to more than a couple hundred years and failed to answer life's most important questions. When I'm seeking information, I want the full answer. I want to know as much as I can. I want the proof to back it up. And when it comes to Jesus Christ, I want to receive him fully. None other than Christ's one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church built on his rock Peter offered that to me. And none other than the Catholic faith gave proper respect to Jesus' mother, Mary, who said yes to Christ before anyone else.
She offers many excellent reasons for why she converted to the Catholic faith. However, at this point, I want to pause and gently challenge one common line of argument, namely the appeal to historicity and apostolic nature of the Catholic Church as a standalone reason for conversion. On its own, I don't think that argument is strong enough. Simply pointing out that the early Christians believed or practiced something does not automatically make it true or divinely revealed. History alone does not equal revelation, because the early centuries of Christianity were also filled with serious errors and competing movements, Arianism, Nestorianism, Pelagianism, and others, which all emerged very early and were held by sincere, intelligent Christians. Their antiquity did not make them true. So while the church's historicity and apostolic continuity are important and even necessary, they cannot function as a knockdown argument by themselves. In my view, these elements only become truly compelling when they are combined with other strong reasons. The church's doctrinal coherence, her ability to preserve truth through internal conflict, her sacramental life, her moral realism about the human person, and her fidelity to Christ's teaching over time. Now moving on, in the final clip, Bishop Barron explains how Catholics should understand Catholicism in relation to other Christian denominations and other religions. Are we meant to say simply that everyone else is wrong and we alone are right? Let's listen.
Yeah, well, my view is that of Vatican II. And Vatican II is not a great novelty there. It reflects, moves within the great tradition. Namely that in all the great religions, traditions and religious philosophies and so on, you can find elements of truth. You can find truth to some degree. You can find rays of light, and that seems obvious to me. I mean, there's no religious tradition. There are a lot of, let's say, silly, fringe sort of, religious expressions, but think of the mainstream religious expressions in the human race. If there was nothing true in them, there was nothing good or beautiful or valuable, they would never have survived. They would never have fed people for so long. So the church, I think, very gratefully acknowledges these facts. But the fullness of truth, the fullness of it, in that sense, the one true religion, it doesn't mean all the other ones are simply false. It means they participate in the truth to a lesser degree. Now, let me give an analogy for this, maybe. So, do you remember that scene in the beginning of Good Will Hunting, the famous film where the professor at MIT puts this complex formula or equation or something, problem on the board, and he challenges the students, can anyone solve this? And the students all try in different ways, and the star of the movie solves it. But my point is this: is there one correct answer to that problem? Well, yeah, there is. There's one perfectly correct, adequate answer. But might a professor at MIT, or bring it down to grade school math if you want, might a professor say, yeah, the answer you gave, that's not correct, but it's close. It's getting there. You did a lot of it correctly, And then another one, yeah, that's good and that's good, but no, you see how you're falling short of the full answer. And then maybe there's some that, no, that's just ridiculous. No, you're not even in the ballpark. You're not even close to solving it. Or maybe some never even tried. My point is, you can say there's the one correct answer. Yeah, that's right. But you don't have to, therefore, simply denigrate every other answer. You can say, no, to varying degrees, they approach the fullness of the correct answer. Now, let me just stay with that analogy because it helps me a little bit. So there I'm looking at, major problem and finding the solution. That's putting the stress all on us, that we're going to strive to figure this out, and some get it and some don't, right? But let's suppose the guy that writes the equation for you and watches as you try to solve it, at some point gives you the answer and says, no, this is actually the answer. And I realize that none of you is really going to get this completely right. And I now want to reveal the answer to you. And I'm the one who posed the problem. So I know the solution to it, and I want to give it to you. Now we're getting into the realm of faith as opposed to mere reason. If the puzzle is, let's say, human life, the meaning of it all, or whatever you want to say, that's the puzzle, that's the conundrum. And we're all striving to figure it out. And some are getting closer than others, right? But then in the fullness of time, the one who gave us the conundrum also deigned to give us the answer to it, revealed to us the answer. Well, then I would say, yeah, that's it. That's the right answer, And that would be, that's the one true answer, was given to me by the one who originally posed the conundrum. Now we're getting in the ballpark of what we mean by a revealed religion accepted in faith, Now, once that answer is given, can I strive to understand it more fully using my reason? Of course. That's called theology, right? Now, fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. So once the answer was given, maybe it's like, I'm not really bright enough to really see why that's the answer. But now, having studied it more, now I get it. Now I see why, yes, that is the answer. See what I'm doing here, Brandon? In a way, I'm trying to just get at this thing from different angles, because it's, in a way, a notoriously complex problem. There isn't like a neat single argument that sums it up, but there's different ways of approaching this problem.
As Bishop Aaron explains, Catholics do not have to approach other Christians or religions as if it were a zero-sum game of right versus wrong. Instead, the Church invites us to think in terms of fullness. Now, Catholicism clearly teaches that the fullness of truth is only found in the Catholic Church, while other Christian denominations and even other religious traditions participate in that truth to varying degrees, but do not possess it in its fullness. This approach allows Catholics to affirm what is true, good, and beautiful in other faiths without compromising the truth claims of Catholicism itself, holding firmly to the truth while engaging others with clarity, confidence, and charity. I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God
I'm not against science, but the idea that science explains everything is itself a religion, and really kind of the dumbest religion ever concocted.
Most of you know Charlie Sheen, the Hollywood wildcard made famous by the TV series 2.5 Men and an infamously chaotic lifestyle marked by drugs, scandals, and public meltdowns. Chaos was his brand. But in recent years, Sheen has hinted at a quiet spiritual reckoning, speaking more openly about God, meaning, and faith, things you wouldn't associate with the old Charlie Sheen persona. Taken together, his words suggest something deeper is shifting beneath the surface. Watch the first clip and make up your mind yourself. Let's take a look.
Times, the timing of certain events that made you think there was a supernatural quality here. I mean, how would you identify? Is that God? Like, what is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I got asked this with Bill Maher just last
Bill
week.
Maher asked you about God?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Really? What world is this? What is happening?
I don't know.
Bill Maher is asking you about God. We are
Yeah.
in a brand new age.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't happy with my answer.
All right. Well, now you have a chance to
I have
revise
a
it.
chance to. Yeah, there's most days I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
And that's what I should have said in that moment. Most days I don't have a better word or anything else for it. It is exactly that. And just whatever my interpretation of that is, you know? But it just kind of caught me off guard, and I should have just leaned right into it, and I did a little bit of a tap dance, you know?
Well, it's kind of weird. We're, about the same age, didn't grow up in a world where people talked about God at all.
Right.
Did you?
No. Well, my dad, devout Catholic growing up, and rather than that, he always, let us know that was his personal journey, and we were welcome to climb on board, but it wasn't anything that he was going to mandate, you know.
Yeah.
And so we did have exposure to it in our house our entire life.
Really?
Yeah. And it never.
What did you think?
I didn't. I saw some. I saw a lot of goodness with it. I saw other stuff I didn't want to align with.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I was talking to Lexi just yesterday. Some days I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, then sure. Well, can I describe it better? Do I have a better prediction?
Yeah.
No. And there's other days I'm like, nah, I don't know. So I'm not. People will read the book, and there's not a chance they say, "Oh, that guy's an atheist."
Right.
But there is a chance they go, "Oh, he's curious. He hasn't fully figured it out." Or
so you're God curious, you would say.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I don't think that's and that's not me just wanting to say that in your presence. That's me having time to
in my presence.
Well, because right? Just to
I don't know. I mean, I'm hardly an authority on the subject.
No, when I understand the what it means to you. I mean,
it's come to me now. Yeah, I mean, again, things are changing so fast, and I don't have the answers to most questions, but I definitely have become convinced that God's real for sure.
Yeah, no, and
yes.
That's inspiring to see that level of acceptance.
Well, don't you feel it? Kind of.
I do, but there's a part of me that it just still wants to be a science snob.
I get it.
Yeah.
One genuinely interesting aspect of Charlie's explanation is his honesty about the back and forth of belief. He admits that there are days when he's fully in, convinced, open, almost certain, and then other days when doubt creeps in and he starts questioning whether any of this is actually true. That tension is real, and frankly, it's very human. Interestingly, the inner struggle is something G.K. Chesterton explained remarkably well. He said that just as we open our mouths to take in food, chew it, digest it, and allow it to give energy to the body, in the same way we open our minds to truth so that it can give energy to the spirit. Truth isn't meant to be merely tasted and analyzed forever. It's meant to be received, observed, and lived. That's why curiosity about God, while good and even necessary at the beginning, cannot be a permanent resting place. At some point, endless chewing without swallowing leaves you spiritually malnourished. Informed, perhaps, but never transformed. Faith eventually requires a decision, a leap, a moment where we stop circling the question, stop hedging our bets, and finally have the courage to say, God is true. That naturally brings us to the next moment in the conversation. In the final part of the clip, Charlie Sheen admits that he's often tempted to play it safe, to lean on science and hold back from fully accepting the claims of the Christian faith. But Tucker shuts that down almost immediately with a sharp, no-nonsense response. Let's listen in.
Well, you kind of can't. And then you realize that actually the real religious nuts are the science snobs.
Interesting.
Who are sort of desperately backfilling against the evidence. Like, well, what does that mean? Well, shut up. I mean, they're just like so desperate to cling to something that is just absurd. I'm not saying that the physical world can't be measured in a lab. Of course it can.
Right.
And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that, for its byproducts like, I don't know, automobiles and penicillin. But I'm not against science. But the idea that science explains everything is itself a religion. And really kind of the dumbest religion ever concocted.
Interesting.
And the people who espouse it know that it's dumb. And that's why they're so brittle and so given to lecturing you about it. There's no Mormon missionary who's ever been judgier or more persistent than Tony Fauci. Trust the science.
Wow.
Does any Christian ever say that? Trust the religion.
Not that I've ever
Or I'll
met.
hurt you.
Yeah.
I mean, the science religious wackos believe in conversion by the sword. Like, do what we say or we'll hurt you.
Right.
That's not a religion I want to be anywhere near.
Me neither.
No, that's bad.
It doesn't sound loving. Doesn't sound forgiving.
No, it sounds dangerous,
Yeah,
actually.
It does.
Sounds kind of like Al-Qaeda a little bit. So I just think, and it's sad because who acts like that? Only people who know they're wrong act like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually a line in the book that I don't know where I read this or heard this, but somebody smarter than me described science as an ongoing historical series of corrected mistakes.
Exactly.
How about that?
Yes. Yeah, it's just kind of institutional. It's a method for satisfying curiosity and understanding the physical world. And I'm totally for that, completely for that. But at its heart is skepticism and an acknowledgement that you don't know the answers to the most obvious questions. And so keep trying to find the answers.
Sure.
I'm 100% in favor of all of that, of course. But what it's become is the medieval church. Brittle, rigid, punitive, stupid, laughable. And the second you describe it with no emotion, any normal person's like, well, that's insane. I don't want to be part of that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But I'm not, I'm not going to try to solve the unsolvable.
Right.
And I'm fine being completely mystified by it.
Well, that's the beginning of wisdom.
You know what I'm saying?
To admit you're mystified. Right.
Yeah.
Because you're admitting you're not all knowing.
No.
As Tucker explains, it's deeply misguided, even naughty as he puts it, to conclude that science is the only valid source of knowledge. Science is powerful, indispensable even, but the moment we treat it as the sole pathway to truth, we turn it into something it was never meant to be. Science answers many questions, but not all questions, especially not questions of meaning, morality, or purpose. He goes on to argue that many people today are effectively promoting this idea as a new kind of religion, which is scientism, where anything that cannot be measured, tested, or replicated is automatically dismissed as irrelevant or unreal. Now, the irony is obvious. This mindset often ends up being far more rigid and dogmatic than the religious faith it so confidently ridicules. That's why Tucker describes it as the worst form of religion, one that refuses to admit its own limitations while claiming total authority over every question of reality. This is precisely where the Catholic perspective becomes crucial. In the next clip, Bishop Barron explains why science and religion are not enemies, but are in fact complementary, exactly as the Catholic faith has always taught. Let's listen in.
Science led to faith. It was not repugnant to faith.
You know, I think of this, go back to my early years. Where did I first learn science? And then philosophy, which I came to love. It became the central study of my young, adulthood, and I got my degree in philosophy. Where did I learn all that? At Catholic schools, at Catholic University in Washington, at the Institut Catholique in Paris. The Catholic faith, at its best, has never stood opposed to reason. No, it loves and embraces the sciences, loves and embraces philosophy, loves and embraces all expressions of rationality. Where did I first study the great novelists and the poets, those who explore the objective intelligibilities within human experience, within the human mind? I learned all that in Catholic schools. Right. Very early on in the tradition, there was a fellow named Tertullian, church father, great figure in many ways. But Tertullian said something, and he expressed an attitude that the church found repugnant. Tertullian said, "What has Athens to do with Jerusalem?" And what he meant was, what do the speculations of the philosophers of Athens have to do with the revelation given to the Jews? Well, the church repudiated that. The church at its best from the earliest days. Think of Paul himself all the way through Thomas Aquinas and up to the present day. The church at its best had said, no, Athens and Jerusalem belong together. The questing mind of Athens should not be put to rest. No, on the contrary. Allow all of that rich intellectual energy to express itself as fully as possible because it's always seeking some form of logos and therefore ultimately is seeking the source of that objective intelligibility. It's seeking the source of all of that patterned intelligibility in the great intelligence of God. Now, that's the Catholic tradition. Faith and reason. John Paul II is one of his last encyclicals called Fides et Ratio, that wonderful et, and. See, the Magi believed in reason, to be sure, and faith. Their reason brought them to faith. I'll close with this. These twin groups, you might say, around Christmas. The shepherds. Well, shepherds were very ordinary people. In fact, shepherds were kind of seen as lowlifes. Their testimony wouldn't have been accepted in court. They weren't taken seriously. The angel appeared, though, to the shepherds. Good. The simplest people come to Christ. And maybe they're the first ones really to hear the message. That's true. But now think of the Magi. Now we're the other extreme from the shepherds. Now we're not dealing with just the sort of common, ordinary people. We're dealing with the cultural elite. We're dealing with the philosophers and scientists in one of the most advanced cultures of that time. Christ has come to them too. And in fact, their very work leads them to Christ. Faith needs science to keep it from becoming superstitious. There's a danger of that. If you just block out reason, then faith can become superstitious. But the sciences need faith so they don't become self-contained and self-referential. Faith and reason. And a great place to look to find this coming together is in the journey of the...
Building on what Bishop Barron highlights, it's worth noting that for decades, critics of the Catholic Church have pushed the idea that religion, especially Christianity, is somehow at war with science. It's an old worn-out narrative, and almost on cue, they reach for the Galileo affair as if that single episode settles the entire debate. Yet, as Bishop Barron consistently reminds us, the Church has always taught the exact opposite. Catholic teaching holds that faith and reason are not competitors, but collaborators, two wings, as St. John Paul II famously put it, on which the human spirit rises toward the contemplation of truth. When rightly understood, they don't cancel each other out, they strengthen and elevate one another. So don't fall for the claim that the Catholic faith is anti-science. Nothing could be further from reality. In fact, many of the foundations of modern science were laid by Catholics who believed that studying the natural world was not a rejection of God, but a way of honoring the Creator himself. And ironically, this is exactly what Galileo himself had to say about the relationship between science and religion. He said, "Science explains how the heaven goes. Religion explains how to go to heaven." I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.
He introduced me to the bishop, and I was then confirmed, finally, 10 years after being baptized into the Catholic Church.
Recently, I watched an interview with Sabatina James, a Pakistani Muslim woman who became Catholic, and her testimony absolutely stunned me. It's the kind of story every Catholic should hear because it shows in real flesh and blood what courage looks like in a world that's quick to punish anyone who dares to stand with Christ. In the first clip, she talks about her very first encounter with Christianity after moving to Austria and how that experience collided with the worldview she grew up within Islam. Let's listen.
The first thing you notice coming, the first revelation of Christianity, to me anyways, was Jesus on the cross. Present in every classroom. You go hiking, that's a big thing in Austria, right? And all the trails, you go to people's houses, in the living rooms, you would have the cross. And so they were really very proud. And it certainly, the first seeds were sown there for my later conversion. Because when I was in Dedar, where I grew up in this little village, I used to hear the voices of women. They would cry out aloud because they were beaten by their husbands. And the reason they would scream so loud is they wanted help. Police doesn't come. So they're expecting the villagers to help. And the villagers would come, but they would surround the victim and accuse her. And when I came to Austria, in this little village, every morning in the classroom, the children would surround someone who was beaten and bruised, and they would look up to the victim and pray to him, because that was Jesus on the cross. And that to me was the most striking difference between the world shaped by Muhammad and the world shaped by love. So that was, I always found that very fascinating, because I think somehow, even without understanding the theology of Christianity, Jesus on the cross fascinated me. And to this day, I don't need theological books.
Yeah.
Just looking and gazing at him on the cross, that to me is Christianity.
What struck me most in this clip is how she was captivated simply by seeing Jesus on the cross. Think about that. 2000 years ago, the Romans used the cross as a weapon, a brutal tool designed to crush anyone who challenged the empire. It wasn't just execution, it was a psychological warning. This is what happens to anyone who stands against us. And yet today, that same cross has become the most recognized symbol of hope and redemption in the world. What the Romans forged as an instrument of terror, God transformed into the doorway to freedom. That's why Sabatina's insight hits so hard. Before she ever studied theology or opened the catechism, she grasped the heart of Christianity by looking at the cross. She recognized that Jesus, the one true God, reveals himself most clearly in that moment of sacrifice. In the next clip, she shares how Catholic priests and nuns responded when she said she wanted to leave Islam and become a Christian. Here we go.
I always had this inner voice within me, strangely. Even though Joseph was a evangelical, to go to the Catholic Church. The man on the cross was there. And I always followed him. So I went to this big cathedral in Linz and saw this holy water. And I said, oh, it's some sort of ritual. So I was just making these weird signs.
Look around, sorry, something.
Making these weird sounds. And this young man comes and, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I have a meeting with the Pope today. He just looked at me going, the Pope's not here,
Yeah.
but he brought me to the priest. And I tell the Catholic priest about my newfound love in Jesus Christ and the things that I was experiencing. And he said to me, it could be that Muhammad was a prophet too. We don't know.
The priest said
The
this? This is in Austria?
This is in Austria.
Yeah.
This is the time where Saint John Paul had kissed the Quran
Yeah.
and people wanted to follow.
Yeah.
So all religions were a way to God.
Oh,
And I experienced that firsthand. So he let me go. He didn't tell me that I needed catechism.
Oh,
He
my
didn't
goodness.
say,
Oh,
oh,
my
you should come and if there's any problem, come to my church and I will give you a room if you have to flee. Nothing like that. He sent me home. And then I saw a nun. She had, she was properly suited and booted. She was on her bike and I made her stop. I was on fire for Jesus and I needed someone to speak with me. So she stopped and very sweet. Catholic sisters are always so extremely sweet. And she said, yeah. I said, I believe in the same as you. And she didn't know what to do. And I just said, I was a Muslim. I wanted her to be happy.
Yeah.
And she said, all religions are a way to God.
Oh, my goodness.
We must just believe deeply in what we believe. And I just thought, if I believe deeply as a Muslim that killing an infidel is going to get me to heaven, is that a way to God?
How is that the way to go? This is, as you describe, I'm not even terrible. I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised by these experiences, especially in Austria and Germany. But truly, this is...
This part of her story is honestly painful. A Catholic priest and a nun, people whose entire mission is to proclaim the gospel, turning away from a woman who walked in saying she wanted to follow Christ, that's heartbreaking. Now, to be fair, we aren't hearing the full context. Maybe the region was under surveillance, maybe conversions were considered criminal, maybe even speaking with her could have put the entire parish in danger. Because there are some places, one wrong move by the priest can get the church bombed. So yes, their fear was real. But even with that understanding, we can't ignore the uncomfortable truth. Christians cannot let fear decide whether we evangelize. Prudence matters, of course it does. We shouldn't be reckless or deliberately provoke danger. But prudence is not an excuse to sidestep the Great Commission. Jesus didn't say, go and make disciples unless the political climate is tense. Look at the apostles. None of them sat around calculating safely before preaching. They walked into hostile lands, unfamiliar cultures, pagan nations, fully aware they could die for proclaiming Christ. And most of them did. Their courage is why we have the faith today. So when Sabatina recounts this moment, it's a wake-up call. The church is never at her best when she is afraid. She shines most brightly when she trusts God in dangerous situations and steps into discomfort for the sake of the gospel. In the next clip, she explains how she was eventually baptized and conformed into the Catholic Church. Let's listen.
So the story came out, and at one of my press conference, there was a priest. I love him, Rudy. Rudy was amazing, and he was a Catholic priest, and he just sat there and looked at me. He said, when you were speaking about Christ to the press, it felt like you were describing the sun to a bunch of blind men. And I was so grateful that finally there's a Catholic. And I said, I want to be Catholic.
I want to be Catholic, but the priests and nuns I meet in Central Europe, they don't seem to want to do anything.
Yeah, so he baptized me, but he never told me that I need to be confirmed. And I was invited. See, this is how providence works. By a priest. He has this teeny tiny little parish of the traditional Latin Mass order. He invited me to come and speak about persecuted Christians. And he was shocked that I came. He said, I have a really small church and you're very famous in Germany, so why did you come? And not to speak, but to seek.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to the bishop, and I was then confirmed, finally, 10 years after being baptized, into the Catholic Church.
This part beautifully reflects the biblical promise. Those who seek will find. God never abandons a sincere seeker. Having said that, Christianity has never been about us climbing our way up to God. It's about God coming after us. He searches for his lost children, and all we must do is to allow ourselves to be found. And God draws people into his church in countless ways. A quiet moment, a providential conversation, an unexpected encounter that changes everything. Well, in Sabatina's case, her honesty and humility opened the very path that led her to baptism and confirmation. Now, in the final clip, Sabatina shares the mission she believes God entrusted to her, returning to Pakistan to rescue Christian women who are being abused and enslaved. Let's listen.
I had this great desire to help the persecuted Christians, but I had left Pakistan as a Muslim. I wanted to hear the sorrows of that community. And the only way you can do that is by being with them, listening to them. And how do I do that? I would have to go back to Pakistan. And what would happen to me in Pakistan if anyone finds me? I would be either imprisoned under Section 295 for blasphemy, or the mob would kill me. But I knew it was the will of God because it was my duty to help the persecuted. This is how I discovered the will of God. What is my duty? But I was scared. And so when I read the story of Joshua in the Bible, who was scared of the giants, even though he had an order to go. Like, who is my giant? The jihadis?
Yeah.
Am I going to go? I thought, if it's the will of God, for whom I have given up the most precious thing in my life, which was my family, then I will go. And so I actually went to Pakistan.
Not the loveliest vacation, I imagine. That's astounding. It really, you can make a sort of joke, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I went not just to Pakistan. I went to the most dangerous area within Pakistan. And my driver was someone from Peshawar. I was there with a human rights organization, and with they were Pakistanis themselves, and one of them was a convert from Islam who had spent years in prison himself, and is sort of an evangelical pastor, and probably the most courageous man I've met. And he had organized this driver, and I just said, oh my gosh, how can you have a Muslim from Peshawar driving us throughout this whole journey? I mean, that's the stronghold of the Taliban in Pakistan. How do you know he's not one of them? And he said, well, where we are going, you need someone like that to even get through. And I just went, where are you taking me? Well, where the victims are. And then when we arrived there, I always had armed men with me. And when we arrived there, even at those so-called hotels, you would have these men with Kalashnikovs and turbans standing there. It was terrifying. And there was an area where the victims would all meet to speak with me. And then the bodyguard came and said, they have killed one of the victims. And I don't know the whole story of her. I just know I was terrified.
Of course.
I said, I'm not going. I want to go back to
Austria, Germany.
Yeah. And then he said to me, think of Queen Esther. God called her to save her people. And she was scared. And what did she do? And I said, well, she went because of Mordechai, who encouraged her. And he said, I'm your Mordechai, and I want to encourage you to go. I was like, thank you.
Thanks, Morty. I'll be there.
So I read the story of Queen Esther, who said, if I die, I die, but I will fulfill the will of God, basically. And so I did. And to this day, I'm so glad that I did. Because out of that trip, something amazing has been established. We have Operation Moses, which is the freeing of slaves. Pakistan still has slavery. And many of the slaves are Christians. So we basically free slaves. And we help victims that are accused of blasphemy laws. We help bringing back Christian girls that have been abducted and forcefully converted to Islam. Pakistan, every year there are about 1,000 Christian and Hindu girls that are abducted and forcefully converted to Islam. And this is what we do. But in my case, I mean, the journey wasn't over, because on that trip, we were followed by an Islamist organization. And at one time, a dead body was thrown on my car to make us stop. And I just thought, this is the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is actually how I start my book. And it was a long night, and I described all the details in my book. And I wanted to visit people in prison as well. But then, after this, the people that had organized the trip, they said, the person that needs the most help right now is you. You must leave the country.
When they start throwing dead bodies on your car, that is a strong sign that time's up.
Yes. And I miraculously survived. And my police officer, whenever I even started to say God, he said, I know. You're God. He thought it was horribly imprudent for me to go there.
Imprudent. That's a very diplomatic way to put it, I think.
I think the most prudent thing is the will of God.
Hmm.
And if that will leads you to risk your life, then it's still the most prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's why I did it. And we have saved countless lives since then, and we still do. So we don't advertise our work. So by the way, if you don't find, where is that? We don't.
You have to be a little undercover, I imagine, in that line of
Yes.
work.
Yes.
I don't know how many of us would have the courage to do what she did, but the line she says at the end is just beautiful. She says that the most prudent thing you can do with your life is to do the will of God, even if it puts your life at risk. That is just extraordinary. That's the conviction the apostles lived by, the saints lived by, the martyrs lived by, the popes lived by. Because whenever the gospel is proclaimed, evil will try to silence it, either by killing the message or the messenger. But that has never stopped Christians, and it must never stop us. The good news is too important to hide, too powerful to bury, and too true to be intimidated. Like St. Ignatius of Antioch said, "Let me be food for the beast, through whom it will be granted me to reach God. I am God's weed, only let me reach Jesus Christ." I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.